I had to reboot it today. That was heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to reboot it in the wrong when you really need it.
In the meeting.
Have you been doing that? Snoozing and then suddenly it comes up in the wrong moment when you
Yes,
it's counting down 15 seconds and you're like, okay, I'm gonna do a hard exit on this meeting.
No, it definitely happened during the meeting.
It's always when you don't want it to happen, right? Then it happens.
But I've been at
automatic software updates coming.
It feels like it has been kind of raised the bar or the tolerance. The number of snoozes you can make are less nowadays. Now it's in my computer at least. I think I have one snooze, and then you're like, okay, I might want to snooze now, but then I don't know when it comes up next time. How bad will it be? So it's a bit bad to have one snooze, I would say.
Yeah.
There's probably some AI algorithm who's controlling it, right? What is the optimum number of snooze you should do? And it's counting down.
Yeah.
It's probably two to stress you. Like you get one chance and then...
they say it's one, but it actually turns out you have another one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for the audience, we say welcome to this episode of Nerdy Consultants, talking about their computer issues.
Tech issues.
But with that said, I think we're live, aren't we? Yeah.
Ah, perfect.
Cool.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you, Andrea. So Anders and Henrik will not be able to make this podcast today. So I'm Per Osterman, and I will try to stand in for them and be the host for this team that we have around the table here. We are all 4 people. And a little bit of the reason why I am here. Yeah, of course, I know Goran a little bit from before. And I'm very much like to talk about this topic about the data, analytics, AI, and what it can do for the companies I'm normally working with when I'm at Accenture. I've been running what we call applied intelligence for 10 years, and it has been interesting 10 years when it comes to evolution of technology, evolution of different types in technology, but also maturity of the clients we are working with in this area. So I think we can do a lot of more things. I think we're just in the starting of this area, and we will talk more about how AI can do good for society in the next couple of hours. So that will be a super interesting topic. And with me, I have Andrea.
Yeah.
You can present yourself, Andrea.
Definitely. So I'm Andrea Risberg. I work within Per's team as a data and AI strategy consultant. I also lead our Nordic work on responsible AI, which is something that lies really, really close to my heart, and something I think we'll be seeing more of over the coming months and the coming years, something that more and more companies will start to put a lot of investment into, but also a lot of efforts. So that's something I'm looking forward to speaking about more today.
Cool.
Jonas, would you like to say something about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Jonas Widerberg, also part of Per's team, strategy manager within Applied Intelligence. But my background is more about like big data and finding out the things you can do with big data, and that's what interests me. Trying to get the right insights out of that data, and combining that to do good for society is perfect. So hopefully we'll discuss that more today.
Thank you, Jonas. Petter?
Yeah, Petter Bohman. I am also part of the Accenture Applied Intelligence team. So I've been with Accenture for a long time, but I nowadays work mostly with data visualization and helping clients, understand their data in efficient ways. That's short about me.
I know that you are completely dedicated to this area, and I think so. We are an Accenture team here. You realize listening into this, and normally we talk about clients. We talk about how we can help clients to become data driven, and we have a big team behind us. But tonight we will talk about why we are in this field and why we're working with this, and also what we think this can lead to, not from an Accenture point of view, but from what we are coming from and what we are working on. So what we think this area can actually do for society. And AI is based on data, right? Data is what AI will never become as good or bad as data it's provided with. And I would like to maybe ask you why you are interested in this and how you came to this point.
Sure.
Who should I start with? Who wants to start?
I can start because but when I started at the university, I mean, big data was a big thing. And when we got out of the university, I kind of liked to understand what you can do with all that data. And then I got into marketing, and marketing is a lot about getting insights out of data and like promoting the right ad or whatever like that. But then AI come along, and you can do a lot of like algorithm stuff on that. And I got into conditional monitoring for industries. I think that's really interesting. And then you realize like you can combine all that data from different companies and so on. So and from different areas to create better insights on other insights on totally different things. But that's how I got into data and like find the interest for analytics. Andrea, maybe you.
Yeah, maybe a little bit on the same track. So I come from the business side originally. I studied economics, I studied finance, and when I studied, we were talking about externalities and how you account for your externalities.
What is that?
It's basically an economic term for the negative impact that you have, that you want to account for and have on your balance sheet. Economists out there don't prove me on that, but if I remember correctly, it's basically the definition. But I was really frustrated because we weren't talking about the use of data or the use of digital. And at that point, I was really curious about the positive externalities, about how data and technology can help us improve our societies. I was really interested in like politics and so on. And I was really frustrated that we weren't really talking about, when politicians were out lobbying for votes or they were standing in live TV debates and so on. No one was talking about data or digital or anything like that. So I was really frustrated by that. And then that interest kind of grew into also thinking about the negative externalities. So how can data, technology, AI, things like that also impact people in the wrong way if we don't consider the negative impacts that can possibly occur. So all of that kind of led me to here. I've done a lot of work in responsible AI before joining Accenture, worked with a lot of really cool companies and other types of organizations, and really seen how organizations are tackling these issues in practice, which is it's something to admire, and you can also say that there's a lot of work to still be done.
But it's a fairly new field, isn't it?
It is.
This has become very much the topic of the day, with all the regulations, of course, but also with the non-biased solutions. Isn't AI actually, if you create the wrong solution, it is scaling up the problem extremely fast. Yeah. And that is making it also a bit dangerous, right?
Definitely, and I think that's really important to keep in mind when we're talking about this, that it is a new field. I mean, AI as a technology has been around for several decades, but AI ethics is something we've been discussing and researching it started quite recently. And it has definitely accelerated over the last, say, 5 years or so. So it's safe to say that we're really in the starting phases. But as you said, I mean, regulators are now looking into this area. So policymakers are becoming aware of this. So it's about time to actually start doing things also. As an organization.
But it feels like it's a hyped field, and more and more are talking about it and trying to address it. But it's also interesting that other waves or hypes or whatever in the data field, they have had somewhat more of a solution to it, like an easy solution. You don't have capacity to analyze this data, you need a big data solution, so you pour some money here to vendor X, we don't have a good way to analyze or visualize data. You get the data visualization tool and pour money there, and then you kind of magically think you have solved the problem. You can debate that, but this is, for me at least, there's no kind of obvious, easy fix of it. It's more of a more fundamental change in how we work and analyze data, and how we ensure that we address this and take care of it in the process.
But also base the insights on data that we know is correct, because that could also be a problem when you start doing algorithms on data that might not be correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's something we have 2 hours. We can deep dive on that. But what about you? What about your why did you end up here, and why do you do what you do?
No, but I think my story is I'm an engineer, and I came to know about AI and machine learning quite long ago, almost 20 years ago, in university in the US, and I was really fascinated about neural networks, and support vector machine was a kind of a hot topic back then, and different computer vision solutions and things like that. So I was learning that, and actually helping a professor with some research there as well, and felt like I've finally found something that really interested me. The previous years of the university has been kind of more I'm most likely preparing for something else, but finally I found something that was really fun and rewarding, and also extremely challenging. So I kind of had an idea that I wanted to work in that field, but then when I moved back to Sweden, I couldn't really find any place in Nordics, I would say, that had, at least outside academia, but almost not in academia either, that had any positions or any work in the field. So I kind of tagged along on one of my buddies to complete some business studies. I applied for Accenture. I kind of became a management consultant, and then realized that we had a lot of interesting data in our assignments with clients, and then suddenly I kind of found a niche working with customer data and customer analytics. And at that time, this was a couple of years in my career at Accenture, we had this global initiative called Accenture Analytics, and I got involved in that. And then Per came into the picture and was the kind of appointed lead of the analytics practice in Nordics. And I was quick on kind of applying or jumping on that ship. And I think that's my kind of background into it. The interesting part is, so I have some kind of more technical background as well, but my kind of years as a management consultant, then I realized that, communicating data and communicating insights is really something that Accenture has in the DNA. So I learned so much during my first 3 years as a kind of analyst and consultant in different high-pace projects. And for me, data visualization is kind of a hybrid field of that. You have data, and you need to understand how you analyze it and explore it, but then you have the kind of the front end of it, or the actual visualizations is has a lot of the commonalities with how we present things and communicate things. So that's kind of where I am, combining these two legs of my career, I would say.
Do you have a graph that you hate?
Oh yeah,
a graph that you absolutely should not use when communicating?
Yeah, trigger warning. Yeah. No, but people always kind of look at my direction when someone shows a pie chart and laughs a bit, like, oh yeah, no, that shouldn't be allowed. And actually, Per actually was in a meeting presenting a 3D pie chart, and I was not in the meeting, but someone screen dumped that slide and sent it to me. Per is showing a 3D pie chart. You should learn him.
And I got a ping from you that the pie chart police is here. Right?
Yeah. So I don't know how to kind of handle that. No,
so no pie charts.
Not 3D pie chart.
No, not 3D pie chart. Yeah, I guess that we can agree on. But pie chart has been kind of the punching bag of data visualization for I don't know 10 years. 10 years ago, everybody was don't do pie chart. And at that time, I think it was, especially in business contexts, so common that people just, I like the kind of roundness of it. We put it there. Does it tell you anything? It doesn't really help us. And I think we're in a slightly different place right now. But I think, there are settings where a pie chart actually works. It's kind of easy to understand, but the things like if you have multiple categories and things like that, it's not really readable and useful. And they're like a bar chart. Why not?
But I think what you're saying, I mean, you've been teaching about this better for a while, right? What is making a good visualization good and what is making a bad visualization bad, right? And I try to remember the pie chart to avoid it. But actually, the case you mentioned, it wasn't my pie chart.
No, I know, Per.
I inherited. But my wife is actually working a lot with annual reports and creating annual reports. And I never seen so many pie charts like in the annual reports, and I tell her, so it's contagious, right? I tell her that you should never use a pie chart because
and she asks why.
Yeah, I will ask her to call you, the pie chart police, and then she will get to know about that.
No, but I think like there are like I don't see myself as a very aesthetic person in like being good at designing things. I kind of stick to what I know. I went to engineering and physics, which is maybe the least designy people ever. But my point is that a lot of the kind of, I shouldn't call them rules, but the guidelines in the field, they have kind of research behind it, or there are actually arguments why is a pie chart not a good idea 9 times out of 10.
It depends on what you want to show as well.
Depends what you want to show. But there's a saying by a guy called Edward Tufte, the only thing worse than a pie chart is several pie charts. Okay. I guess I agree with that. That's typically. But hey, I showed a slide with 5 pie charts last week, I think, but it actually were very clean. It was just like 1 number each pie chart.
That's great.
It worked.
Good example. So we heard about your stories, right? I can tell maybe a little bit of my story, why I'm here. So I'm a bit older than you. So I was around in the 90s as well. I was around in the 90s as well. And in the 90s, I was working in the aerospace business. So I was spending my time in the 90s in the US and in Europe, working with European Space Agency most of the time. And I actually was starting up together with a big team, a project called GeoWarn, Global Emergency and Warning System, using space infrastructure and also ground infrastructure and also some airplanes to detect natural disasters, early warnings for everything from forest fires, from insect infestations, from drought, and also tsunamis, which you cannot detect in predict really, but you can see the effect of it. So combining a lot of kind of data sources that you get from space through images, a lot of instruments coming, which actually can detect actually the moisture in agriculture areas from space. Right? You can detect if the water is if you watered enough or not enough to optimize water. But all of this was experimental in science as satellites and science infrastructure. And this was a collaboration between the US and Europe, and also I think the Japanese agency was in there as well. And we tried to launch it as a commercial project in the 90s. It failed completely. Even if we said we could save thousands of lives, we could save billions of infrastructure, but the technology was not ready. We couldn't really work and work on the data in an effective way to get these early warnings out in a smart way. And also it could be used for military purposes as well. this technology, right? So it was not the
was that a reason for stopping it, or
it was a reason for stopping it? UN actually, we went to UN, present it, and they finally said this can be a curse and a blessing, right? But it's probably going to be even worse if it's used in the wrong way. So and we were not really ready with the technology. But ever since that project, which I worked with for a couple of years, I thought, there will be a time when we are ready for this, and maybe this time is now, right? But when I started with Accenture, I was working with a lot of the venture business and different kind of businesses. Then I became more working in the BI area, which I thought was interesting, but also a little bit of boring to create all these reports, right? Which no one read. Then this opportunity to work in the analytics and area now called Applied Intelligence at us came up, and I thought this is an opportunity to work more with data and create good out of data and business results out of data, which was the angle we took. And now, 20 years after I left the aerospace business, I'm back into a project that we're working on globally with actually the same purpose, using the space infrastructure and ground infrastructure to detect issues like forest fires, early warnings. So I think you can do a lot of good things, but what is driving me to this space is because I really think it can enhance business, enhance the world we live in, to work with data and also predictive analytics, more advanced analytics. And AI, of course, machine learning.
But what satellites are you then in that project? Or are they private or?
No, public. So that's the problem as well at that time. Now it's different, right? But at that time, long time ago, they were all scientific satellites, Earth remote sensing satellites like ENVISAT, ERS 1, 2, and so on, right? So this is now different. I think ESA has very recently, just a year ago, started a commercialization department, just because they really want to make this scientific area public and use for industries, right? So I think NASA started that, pushed by SpaceX a lot a few years ago, and that has been quite successful. So I think it's moving into the right direction, but there is a lot of opportunities for this industry to create good things, and that will be where we need to use technologies like AI to actually process all this data in a smart way to detect, problems. And easy things, like if you have an earthquake, you don't know what kind of infrastructure is existing, what kind of bridge does exist, where can you send your rescues, people, and so on, right? So these kind of easy things can be solved very straightforward today. Right, so moving into a little bit topic of today, right? If I just threw out a question here, when it comes to doing good for public using AI, what comes to your mind?
Healthcare. I think in general, I think healthcare is one of the industries that we're going to see the largest positive impact from the use of AI. It has a clear impact on people's lives, right? Given the context, and I'm a strong believer that we can really transform the way we look at healthcare and the way we look at health in general, with everything from being able to predict diseases so that we can treat them in time, to being able to optimize your way of living, of course in a healthy way. But I think there are so many good examples of how AI and data are really, really helping people in their daily lives and also saving lives.
What kind of problems do you see in this area?
Yeah, so with good comes potentially bad impacts or effects also. So naturally, healthcare is what we call a high-risk industry, given the same assumptions that it's about people's lives. So there are, of course, really, really important risks to consider. It all depends on the context, of course. It depends on whether you're using AI to decide whether or not you should get a COVID vaccine, or if you're using it to, say, optimize when you should go to bed, or anything more in your daily life. But of course, I mean, there's so many pitfalls when it comes to AI that we need to be mindful of. Everything from the data that we feed our algorithms and making sure that that's representative becomes even more important when it comes to healthcare situations. Usually your population is your population, right? And there's a lot of diversity in our populations naturally. So you need to make sure that you're representing everyone, everything from age to gender to other factors, and taking in them. It's also about how we design the systems and who designs them. We know from research that we as humans have inherent biases. So when I design something, I will naturally apply my inherent biases. It's the way we work. It's no one's fault. No one does that intentionally. Quite the opposite. People usually try and stay objective. But that's definitely a pitfall to be mindful of. And then there's so many things to consider,
My view, I think you're absolutely right. My view is that healthcare, there is a big potential.
Yeah.
But it's also surrounded by a lot of restrictions, right?
Yeah.
And that's for good.
Yeah.
You should be very aware of the danger of this data should not be public, etc., anonymized and so on. But I think the problem I see is that the data is not available. We are blessed in the Nordics, and that's not only in Sweden. I would also know in Norway and Finland they have lots of quality registers, detecting for different types of diseases, and lots of them, and they go back years, like decades.
Yeah.
So tons of data, extremely unique, because many other countries don't have that data. But there is a problem to access this data, right? It can take more than a year for a researcher to access the data they would like to use for their research. And if you don't get access to the data, right, how do you let it loose? How do you connect the different data sources? Because even if you look into one register, it may be combined with data, should be combined with data from another register, actually to detect something that can, change something completely, right? And create a better cure or reduce the suffering from something. And I think that is the problem. Norway, I know, has started to actually combine all their quality registers into a project that the Director Health has started, which I think is a good move. But I haven't heard about that in Sweden.
Is it also combined like cross-border, for example? Because I think that could be also like the next step. If you want to find all these faults that could be there because of AI implementations, I guess the more data you have, it would be easier to also identify those type of faults.
Possibly. I don't know if you can.
But I think an interesting trend we're seeing that regards the general problem around data sharing and accessing the right data, which is a problem in other industries as well, but particularly in healthcare, is that there are innovations coming up that are at least trying to address this problem. For example, synthetic data, where you can actually, using AI, generate fake data, which has the same statistical properties as the real one. And I guess the value proposition of that is that you reduce the time that you have to spend in data acquisition. And if it works, I think it can have extremely large impact.
But that must be so hard to convince. I like the concept of synthetic data, and I understand the need of it. And we talked a bit about it in a client pitch a couple of weeks ago. But then I kind of said to myself, if you know all the statistical properties of the data, how can you rely that you can build stuff that is meaningful with the real data? To some extent, data analysis, or the reason why you're doing, I mean, this is a good field, or a good example of that. If you have hidden patterns that you want to find in the data set that spans to the 50s or whatever, and you realize, okay, there are some really interesting connections here, because now we have some super powerful AI engine that can find these patterns. But how can you ensure that the synthetic data has that? That's, I guess, you don't know on forehand. So I don't say it's useless, but that's where I'm mentally trying to understand, how do you ensure, or how, like, do do you just use it to prepare the models and then you run the real data later on to see that like okay now it's live and now we pull the real data?
I think given where the technology is as of now, that's the way I understand it. That's how you typically use it. So you can actually start modeling in parallel to getting access to the real data. So you kind of you reduce this problem of having a cold start, but it's still, as with a lot of these solutions, it's still quite immature. There are a lot of really great companies out there, small companies, startups, scale-ups, who are specialized in this, who I think are doing a great job, and but they've only been around for a few years. So I think it's a field that's maturing as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
But nothing is as good as real data, correct? Right, of course. Yeah. But I think this area is interesting because it's actually saving life. I think the likelihood to detect breast cancer at an early stage, if you have an AI just doing it, is 92%. I read somewhere. If you have a pathologist doing it, it's I think 95% or 96%. But if you have a combination of an AI solution and a pathologist to do it, you have 99.5% chance to detect breast cancer at an early stage. And I think that is just one evidence that the AI solutions can actually save lives. Just one example.
But I think also it's a good example of combination of human interactions with the data that even enhances the performance of something.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important, especially in healthcare. That could be really useful.
Yeah. No, there will certainly be a lot of evolution on this, right? As long as we get the data, we can do a lot of good things there. Do you have a good example, Petter, on?
No, but I think I can just echo that. I think a lot of the thing we do with data visualization is about empowering the user, and it's kind of pointless without the user. So I think it's super interesting. And how do you actually present data on a meaningful way for a specific user, kind of on the right level with the right information? And we talk about different focus areas, so you can see the overview first, and then you can get the details and drill down and so on. But I guess that's I truly believe that you can. We're only at a very early stage of that. I really like the idea of combining artificial intelligence with humans, and how we actually make decisions in a more smart way.
And I think on that point, making decisions, right? My view when working a lot with companies to actually implement, state-of-the-art technology, trying to get the data into the right shape, maybe on a cloud, which can be shared throughout the company. That's fairly, not straightforward. It's hard work, but it is something everybody knows will make a difference, right? But I see the way you're organized around, if you're a company been around for many years, and then change the way you make decisions based on data, and taking a clinical business, for example. I mean, you've been doing that work probably for 20, 30, 50 years, right? Maybe not 50 years, then you retired, but you've done it for a long time. And how to change with the technology that is developing so quickly, right? The organizations are not. We try to push technology and the access of data to organizations that have been around for years. Isn't that a problem? Isn't that something that is slowing down the value?
I think it's very difficult. I mean, we work quite a lot with that, trying to get companies up and running, understanding the data, taking decisions on data. Yeah. But I also see a point here that is more democratizing the data and the insights across companies, so everybody can see what are the actual KPIs, what are we measuring here, and can take decisions on that based on the progress of what we're doing. And I think that's like key for companies today, to organize them in a way so you can see that type of or that data and those insights and can act on them.
But how do you do that? How do you? I feel like that's such a buzzword now.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to democratize their data. Everyone wants to.
But it could be simple things like you you have goals for a quarter, for example, and you can present them, and you can also present the progress of getting to those goals in, let's say, a screen that you have in the company coffee room or something like that. That could be a very easy thing to kind of drive the company to the right goal. It's not so much about organizing themselves, but it's more about democratizing the data and making it available for people to see.
Maybe teaching people how to interpret it. Yeah. And actually apply it. Otherwise, it's just nice dashboards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a pie chart.
Or a pie chart.
A pie chart. Yeah.
God forbid.
Put a pie chart on the screen.
Yeah, exactly. With the quarter goals. Yeah, that's cool. No, but data literacy for me is maybe a bit. I guess that's what we're talking about, Andrea. I think definitely that's a field that feels like it's picking up speed in many organizations. How do you actually raise the data literacy across the organization? And for me, if you build dashboards, it's kind of a design failure if you need to train people how to interpret it. That's my feeling. But data literacy for me is more about but the next level of things, like how do you kind of drill down or how do you analyze the data yourself? What happens if I drill down on a really small sample and I see a KPI going way off? That you understand it's kind of statistical properties of data. If you go too deep, you can't really look at the average and draw a conclusion on it, for instance. And how you actually think about comparing and benchmarking with relevance. That's for me more the data literacy themes. Reading a bar chart and a line chart. Yeah, I think most people in organizations know how to do that. But then yes, there are of course these, if you start building these experimental dashboards with Sankey charts and core diagrams or all this funky stuff. Yeah, maybe you need to have a crash course in it, but I don't think that's really the right decision to do.
But if you really want to create a data-driven company, you need to have that on all roles that is actually working in the company, right? So if you work with something, you have a desk and you work behind your laptop or whatever, then you probably are. It's easy for you to get to understand how to drill down the data, how to create your own questions and challenge the data in order to find out more about what the real problem is. But if you mount the cars in the factories, right, you also need to understand the data, because you may see quality problems coming up, and you want to understand what component is creating these problems. So probably you need to create personas, for different roles you have in the company. Maybe you also apply behavior science to actually find out how you actually change the way you look at the problem with the help of data.
Yeah, for me that's I don't know, maybe it's the next level of data democratization, but I think that's really where I think successful companies must go towards, where they enable the initial insights, they package it and say, okay, but here's the data. Maybe that guy on the construction belt at Volvo, he sees that, and he or she realized that there's something going on here in this quality of this component. He could see that on this ready-made dashboard, but then he wants to understand, what's driving that, or what's, how's that connected. And data democratization for me is that it doesn't end with the dashboard or with right-click export to Excel and you get the same numbers in an Excel pivot, but actually that you are able to there is a database, data lake house, whatever, where you can access the data easily. You could query, maybe you could connect it, do a join with something. Look at it, visualize it, share it, without too many hurdles and without requiring too much technical competence. That's my view of where we're going.
Cool. Coming back to the topic of good for society, right? I mean, do you have? We talked about healthcare and what we can do there. We talked a little bit about how to change the organizations, how to work smarter. Any concrete example that you would like to bring up? I mean, we are sitting now in a, I would say it's a cellar, right? Old cellar, which is probably heated by the surrounding soil. So it's probably very environmentally smart. But if you take buildings, for example, you know, how to optimize the energy in the building for, you know, creating a nice place to work, nice place to live, without wasting. I think AI can actually reduce waste in many different ways, right? In predicting the demand, you can also optimize your supply, right?
Predicting the weather, for example, in buildings, and you have the temperature, the climate within the building can be steered depending on how many people, those kind of things.
I think overall, when it comes to sustainability, I think here we're going to see and are seeing a tremendous impact from the use of data and analytics. And it usually starts with for reporting purposes. That I mean, there's a growing from the regulatory side. There's growing pressure to report on your performance. So obviously that means that you need to have the necessary data to perform those reports. But it's more than that. It's about making sure that you are achieving your targets, making informed decisions. And I think that's an area that's going to be extremely interesting to follow.
Wasn't that the case with like the insurance and the banking industry 10 years ago with kind of the forced regulations on the compliance, that they had to invest heavily in the systems that could handle the data? I think SAS was kind of one of the bank or kind of the winners of that, you know, a lot of investments in their solutions for banks and insurances. But the good side with that is that, you know, then clients or companies sits with suddenly technical capabilities of doing things. So, you know, on one side it's kind of forced, and it's, you know, maybe it's a bit weird sometimes to see the money that they pour on such things. But then it enables kind of it's what comes after that is interesting, right? When you start, okay, actually now we can do interesting stuff here, analysis and things like that.
And I think that's really interesting when you think about, because I don't necessarily think that a lot of people think like that. This whole, so there's this big pressure of transforming businesses and infusing data in all business functions, basically. And I think, and that's obviously driven by the business impact that's going to have and the business value that will be realized. But what you're onto now, I think, is extremely, it's as important and it's as valid, which is that once you transform all the functions, you also open up for new possibilities across marketing, across sales, across supply, across finance. And that really enables you to achieve even more when it comes to the sustainability part. So I think when we talk about data transformations or digital transformations, we usually talk about the business value in monetary terms. What top line impact are you going to see? What bottom line impact are you going to see? But I think it also calls for this narrative of, okay, what sustainability impact is it going to have? And that obviously relates back to your financial performance as well.
But if you really, you know, become on top of your data, you're really aware of what it can do, you satisfy the regulatory authority, that's great, right? Maybe you feel threatened about your job is going to be taken over by AI, but most likely that part of the work may not be so interesting. Or it can be, right? I mean, there is a lot of debate in the everywhere, right? That AI is a threat for work, but maybe that is an evolution we need to just embrace, because it will actually push ourselves, like we are pushed by the pandemic to actually act in a new way and learn new technologies. We are pushed by the energy crisis to actually accelerate the use of renewable energies and other sources. Maybe also AI will push ourselves to actually bring out new skills and retool ourselves to actually become smarter. But that is the combination of AI. I'm thinking about the combination of AI and human, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
That combination.
I'm no historian, but looking back at what's been when we got more efficient machines and support in farming, it suddenly led to that we could do different things. It was really kind of a needed thing for getting the rest of the industrialization going. So I think historically we've had those type of shifts, right? That suddenly workforce, was something that was a common thing to do and work with suddenly wasn't that there anymore. So I think that can lead to shifts to other things we can do. I mean, we're still doing it. I guess as a society as a whole, it's more efficiency, right? It's like we could do different things instead.
I also think that we should talk more about how it's going to complement the work and not necessarily replace it. And we were onto that a bit before about when we're talking about healthcare and how AI could potentially now be a tool for clinicians to use. They're still going to be the ones making the decisions and performing the actual clinical work, but they have new tools. So it's about this, and you were onto that before as well, about human plus machine, and that's something I think we should talk about more, how it's complementary and how we enable that.
But it's like Petra is doing with visualizations. We're helping people to take easier decisions with the help of data and AI, and I think that's kind of the first part, and the next part could be that like AI takes decisions for us in a way, but then we need to be really sure what data is behind that decision and so on.
Exactly.
But yeah,
to trust it.
Yeah, exactly.
The
To trust it,
right.
trust the data,
quality.
trust it. Yeah, exactly. And trust the algorithm. I don't know. Maybe we do. Maybe we don't.
Do we need to understand the algorithm?
Maybe not. I mean, we have to understand the data behind it, but the algorithm itself, not sure. Do you have any comments here, Andrea or Petter?
Do you want to go? I think the difficult answer is it depends.
Of course.
In some regards, it's going to be regulated, saying that in certain scenarios you're going to have to be able to explain the reasoning behind the decision in certain scenarios. And I think, coming back to the healthcare example, I think in those types of scenarios, in high-risk scenarios, I think it's particularly important. There's this really good example of when AI was used to predict or identify rather cancer cells on a X-ray image. And I'm actually explaining it wrong. It was used to predict whether or not the patient had cancer, looking at X-ray images. And then the clinician got the prediction, and then when they kind of backtrace that, asking the algorithm, okay, what in this picture is the reason behind this decision, and then the clinician was able to say that it was wrong. So in those types of scenarios, I think it's extremely important that we can actually question the reasoning and understand it, but in other scenarios, not so much. So very diplomatic answer.
But the new regulation that EU will actually decide on in December, right, to be implemented in a bit more than two more years. So you get 2 years actually to apply for that new regulations. With that, and that is on AI, the AI Act of EU. Will that regulation also make you have to understand the algorithm in order to create the non-bio solutions? How deep will it go?
Yeah, to some regard, and it's still a draft, as you say. So we don't actually know the extent of that, but we have some understanding. And without going into any details and going into regulatory text, but for AI systems that are considered high risk, you will have very strict restrictions put on you. when it comes to ensuring that your data is free of bias, to checking that it's free, so assessing your AI for fairness, and also being able to explain to some extent. So there will be restrictions on that, but I think also when we talk about these topics that kind of falls under the umbrella of ethical AI or responsible AI, we tend to focus a lot on regulation, and it's of obvious reasons, because it's something that's going to have a huge impact on businesses, on public sector organizations, and us as citizens. But I feel like that narrative is sometimes it's a bit misleading, because to me all of this it's an opportunity, it's a business opportunity, and it's an opportunity to be able to actually use AI more and to drive data democratization internally, and to find these use cases and examples where you can actually apply data and AI for good. And there are lots of examples where companies and also public sector organizations have tried to use the data they have. They've tried to use AI, and they've had good intentions. I think the COVID pandemic is a really good example, where a lot of, in many European countries and in other countries in the world, where they actually from the government side try to look at what data they have to make informed decisions. But a lot of that backfired, because they hadn't really done this prep work of looking at, okay, how can people, what about people's perceptions of this? What about privacy? What about fairness and so on? So if you don't think about that before you actually go out and start using data, you start designing AI systems, you can end up in these scenarios where you actually have to cancel projects where you've perhaps poured millions and millions of dollars into. So for me, it's more about, I mean, the regulation is really important, of course, but it is about the business opportunity as well, and what you can do with data and AI.
Evolution, Peter, of something that, I mean, you were part of developing a solution a few years ago, which actually was not intended to be used in the pandemic, right? Can you say something more? Pre-pandemic,
yeah.
But then there was an obvious solution that actually could help out a lot our Folkhälsomyndighet.
So it connects a bit to what Andrea just said. There was a solution we worked with Telia to establish a new way of using the signaling data they have in their networks. And it was designed with the privacy in mind. So we didn't end up in that situation you mentioned. We knew from start that this, of course, would be scrutinized from an integrity perspective. But that solution was initially intended to be used, or was initially used for insights on people movements. It's called crowd analytics. It was called initially, but changed name to Crowd Insights, and part of Telia Division X. And it was intended to give insights on public transportation, urban planning, tourism, and things like that. Basically, it was a solution that used the signaling data in the mobile networks to understand, and the signaling data, of course, has information of which antennas are being used, and where those antennas are positioned, and also actually where they are kind of directed on the actual mast. And with that information, the intention of this, or the solution, was to understand how people move around in society. The data was aggregated and anonymized, so you could only look at groups of people. But that solution had been live for a year maybe when the pandemic hit, maybe even a bit more, I don't remember. But when the pandemic came, it suddenly we had this solution that was live in I think 4 or 5 Nordic countries, including one Baltic country, I think. And it was basically perfect for understanding, how do people move around, how are our recommendations and guidelines for working from home, avoid public transportation and things like that. And we could use it for kind of seeing how that was, how people did that, how well they did it. And more interestingly, since in Sweden we had these recommendations, whereas in some countries, Nordic neighbors, they had more strict. These are the rules. You're not allowed to do these, and your kind of restaurants are closed, etc. But we had a more soft approach here, and then it was more interesting. How well will we maintain the level? We saw that we dropped the movement, and we saw that people worked from home to a higher degree. But how was that maintained over time? Fairly early on in the pandemic, we got to connect with Folkhälsomyndigheten, and we enabled them that the insights of the things we built there. We built some custom stuff for them that was updated daily, that was a long, interesting journey with them, and I think nowadays they are still using that. As I heard it, they're now more of a paying customer or a commercial customer of Telia for the service. But initially it was kind of a pandemic thing. We tried to just all hands at deck, trying to help out both us and Telia. Mm.
Did you connect that to how the spread was going also? Or?
Yeah, that was more complex. I think we discussed that, and if we could, see how. But no, I guess the short answer is no. But we could, see different trends in ability to work from home, and see kind of community down to lower level on how was it before, how many people of a certain zip code or area did before work from home and work from other ways, how big share of that population moved out in the morning and came back in the afternoon or evening, and compare that. And that was kind of interesting also to see the regional differences, but and I think that was also something, that the whole period was so much about people, thinking and speculating. But some people can't work from home, and it's a fair point, right? In some areas where you have more blue-collar workers, being a bus driver, you don't have the option of working from home. But we, consultant sitting at the computers, we had the opportunity of working from home to a different degree. But we had data on it, so we can actually, show how that looked like region for region or fairly small geographical areas, and we can, stop the speculations. Mm.
And more or less real time, you can see the, different patterns, different times of the day and so on, right? So you could...
Yeah, with 1 day delay, that's almost real time.
Okay, 1 day delay. Okay.
But it was delayed. Due to the anonymization and aggregation and everything like that, we had a solution that was, very, very rigid there. We discussed a bit around that, how can we get still quicker data, which still maintain integrity, but I don't think they have done anything around that. So there's this delay where you collect data for 24 hours, anonymize, aggregate it, and then we kind of make it available for analysis.
Cool. Yes, Jonas.
I think it was Andrea.
No, I was just going to say that I think it's a great example as well where public sector actually collaborates with the private sector, and when we talk about data and AI for good, I think I'd like to see more of those types of collaborations, because I think that it really I mean, we're good at different things, right? So I think that's something to also consider for the future.
Yeah, I think another kind of case of public and private collaboration is in the elderly care project called Memory Lane. Have you heard about that?
Yep.
Where actually the target will be more elderly people who are quite much alone and not having anyone to talk to, but they have a lifetime of stories to tell, right? But they are sitting alone, and of course it's not stimulating at all, and that is a kind of a downward spiral in that case if you don't get someone to talk to and socialize with. So the project is about to create have a bot actually to where the elderly people can talk to that bot and actually tell them the story of their life, high moments, low moments, whatever happened, right? And after some time this bot will learn about this story and they will be able to have a conversation, ask questions. How about this fishing trip? How about this memory when your kids were small and so on, right? This is stimulating a lot. And I think this is, if you talk about AI doing good, that's fantastic, right? Yeah. If you can, and I think I heard about this a couple of years ago, and I talked to a friend of mine here recently about how this has evolved. I don't know, but it's actually a very good idea to use AI to actually be a company to someone, right? AI can be a curse and a blessing, and I think I have 4 kids. They are addicted to their smartphones. And sometimes I feel this is a curse, right? But you can do a lot. You can also turn it around and say AI can be a blessing if you use it in the right way.
Yeah, you talked about data there and creating those memories, and we talked about integrity before. And I'm thinking collecting all that data and connecting people in that way could also be really cool. Like you can really get a human friend to talk to that have kind of the same experiences that you have, or connecting in like the years that you've been fishing, for example, or fishing in the same area, for example. I think that could be pretty cool.
But will we see more of those kind of maybe a bit less commercially driven solutions coming? I like what we see now is kind of the pinnacle of the AI algorithm is kind of TikTok optimization for recommending the next video. I don't know, but and it's all about just getting phones to people to be more stuck to their phones and
I'm optimistic, but I think you can combine data in many ways to get the society being better, connecting people together. But I don't know. I mean, it's open.
I think it depends a lot. I think one thing that really encourages that scenario is the democratization of this technology in general. I mean, there are lots of tools now where anyone who's not a professional data scientist can actually build their own AI models and play around with it. So from that point of view, I think that's a really good scenario for NGOs and for those types of organizations who aren't really commercially driven, who might have a better incentive, at least in the beginning, to explore these types of use cases. But I'm really optimistic also that we're seeing a lot of, perhaps not so much in this particular field, but I think we're seeing a lot of really good examples of how we're changing our business models. And we're actually we're changing the way we think about value. And I think in general, if that's the direction things will go, I think we're going to see more commercially oriented organizations who will explore these fields as well. I think it's about finding that balance of, we live in a society where companies are expected to make a profit, and that still needs to happen. But if we can find innovative ways of solving really difficult challenges where people can be the beneficiator while also combining that with value, I think that's the golden point.
But do you know about the work that Annie and Caro did with Rädda Barnen? Isn't that kind of in that field where we actually use something for less commercial interest?
And that project is really cool actually. So it was about Save the Children, who partnered up with us, and the purpose was to fight. I don't know what specific word they used for it, but
toxic.
That's great. It's the toxic behavior in online gaming among children. I mean, I don't have children myself, but maybe you. You
yeah, I have two that are gamers.
And you probably heard if they're talking to each other on Discord or whatever platform they're using, and in general, like in the online environment, it can be quite harsh. And I think that's like sipping down in ages now. So this project was about using AI to actually find that type of behavior in online gaming chats and being able to steer away from that. So that's a really good example of how we're using data and AI for good purposes.
But maybe that is the way to go, so to say, that you need to have a commercial driven, area to actually develop your AI for something, like we did with Crowd Insight, like with the technology behind the Save the Children, and also technology behind Memory Lane. But you need also companies who are commercially driven needs to be good citizens, so to say, good companies for the society, and I think that requirements from their customers for their brands will increase. And in order to fulfill that requirements, you need to actually do these type of project. And that I think and that's good. It will be more and more, because that technology, that experience, that kind of making good for society will be a low investment for something that is already working, that you actually... so I think this is a good trend, and I see this will continue, right? The more technology will develop.
But it's as Andrea says, I mean, it's been business driven, but now values are changing a little bit, and all companies, of course, want to do good, but they also want to have a good business. So only just sharing data that could be interesting for maybe another organization like Red One, for example, to use that data and to do good with, it's the perfect case and really good branding for that company, I would say.
Yeah. May I throw something on the table?
Do it.
Yeah.
Sure. I'll eat some.
So, do you know Ray Kurzweil?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of predicting the future, right? He was predicting the smartphone. He's predicting a lot of stuff, right? And he's quite old now, but he's I think he's still alive. But he is saying that in the 2030, I think he said that a few years ago, nanobot will in our brains will make us godlike. So I think his vision will be that we will connect ourselves with nanobots to the world. Can you imagine to connect yourself in the brain to Wikipedia?
Yeah.
And everything is not true in Wikipedia, right? That's a problem as well. But you connect yourself, right, to something that is
then
kind
you can
of
get
giving you
virus.
endless of competence, right?
Yeah.
Is this the future? Is this something we want?
I think it could be the future, and I'm not sure if we want it, but I see the human body almost like a operating system going forward, where you can download apps to kind of...
I have my chip in my arm, right?
Yeah, but exactly.
Which I'm using for open my car and open the doors.
Yeah.
That's quite limited if you compare to Ray's kind of vision.
Of course, but I mean, the technology is going forward there, so you can do a lot of those things, and I think going forward you will be able to do even more of those kind of extravagant things.
Peter, you're smiling.
No, but I just feel that I'm lost in this. I don't have a really good point on but I guess I'm a bit hesitant on that vision, but yeah.
But you can also... he's been right before, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But connecting, let's say that you lose an arm, for example, connecting that type of body part to to a human body, and then you will get, I guess, a stronger arm. Even it could be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Or like some companies, like I think there is company Tobii in Stockholm, who is developing technology for really severe handicapped people, right? Who actually can record their voice, and when they cannot speak, they can record before they're getting so ill. They can record the voice if there is an evolution of the sickness, and then they can use that voice to actually play it back by using eye movements and so on, right? This is really interesting enhancement of what you can do when you're really severe handicapped. But that's something else, of course, than having a full, a complete body, right, and then connect to the internet.
I'm more thinking about at least this scenario where you're connecting like your cognitive abilities and suddenly everyone, because I mean what's going to happen then is that suddenly everyone has the same, everyone, it kind of levels the playing field. You're not going to be smarter than I am because we have the same information and we know as much. But I'm just wondering whether we want that to be super philosophical. Us as humans, like we're naturally driven to constantly evolve, and we're not really satisfied with anything. That it kind of lies in our human nature that we want to constantly evolve in everything, in all parts of society. And if we suddenly like have everything at our hands, just wondering what's going to happen is if everyone's just going to feel, they aren't going to feel anything because.
I think there would be a limit where humans cannot evolve fast enough and technology is faster. And in that sense, I think maybe we come to that part, but then it's more of compute power. Would we have different compute power? I don't know.
Becomes the new class issue.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But what do you think? What's your?
No, I cannot say anything about that prediction from Ray, right? But I can just make us been around for a while. What we believe is science fiction today and really far away, and we cannot just imagine it will ever happen. It most likely will happen, because if you go back like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years back, when I started to work 30 years back, right, things that we are doing now, which is very natural, they were. We didn't even think about that. It was just unimaginable. So I think we just need to be, and that's also that's something a lot of people are talking about, right? What is the fear factor with AI? I think it's a big fear factor as well. If you don't regulate, if you don't treat it with respect, etc. I think there are many people, including Musk, that believes that this is the most dangerous weapon ever developed, right? AI, if you don't control it. And so I think what we believe now is far, far away, like you were smiling, Peter, and you are a super smart guy. So, you never know. I think we just need to be aware of that things are going very, very fast. And with the access of data, and also there are very, controlled societies that is regulating the access to data, but not all societies are regulating the access of data. That data is the fuel to any kind of AI solution. And with that data you can probably manipulate a lot, but you can also create a lot of good, depending on the purpose you have.
But I haven't, the innovation the last 20 years, or the kind of the main innovation center has been around the smartphone. Need to be closer. A lot of the things we're seeing that are changed, fundamentally since we grew up, is centered around the phone. Yeah, there are some flying drones to some extent, and there's some stuff going on innovation or kind of better research in medics and better ability to do certain things, but it's kind of not in the same revolutionizing how we live. Do you agree, Per?
Yes, I agree. A smartphone is a device, right? It's like you driving a state-of-the-art car. It's like a device as well, more than a car, right? It's a communication device. And I think the smartphone is just a carrier of a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a way to communicate these things to the public.
Yeah.
So it's not like inventing a new car. We haven't invented a new car. We have evolved the car. The smartphone was a step change in communication from, you know, only having the old car, you know, phone where you where need to call someone and talk to someone. I think the generation growing up now, they feel awkward talking to someone, right? They really want to have another way of communicating. Just calling someone.
And sending voice memos.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I find that weird.
Yeah,
Instead of
but you and I are
talking
too old for that. I think maybe your teenagers are more the ones likely to do it.
But do you guys think the smartphone will be here for a long time, or will it change? Will it be another thing? Will it be the body? Will it be like glasses, or?
I don't know. It feels like, how long was it?
2007.
2007 the iPhone came, yeah.
So it's been around now for
15 years.
It's not that long.
No.
But Google Glass, that was kind of 10 years ago, or when was the idea that, you know, it would have other things, and the smartwatches came, and, you know, but we still have that phone.
And like Oculus technology, like virtual glasses. Or
Yeah.
That's kind of a next step. Imagine having vacations within your VR world.
Yeah. That sounds awful.
Yeah, it really does. But I mean, people are growing up with this digital technology now. I guess it's not that far-fetched.
But that goes back to, you know, the philosophical question. If you can go on vacation there, like, it's kind of this effort and reward. Like, it's just reward and no effort or no price. Like,
but
then kind of the reward doesn't taste, or, you
it's
know,
not that fun anymore.
you know, it's like,
But
push and play.
I'm also a believer that crisis will drive evolution, right? I'm not sure if there was a crisis that pushed the smartphone forward in 2007. Maybe not. But I think we have sustainability. The environment is a crisis now. I think in this area, using data and AI solutions will probably also be revolutionary for how to solve that problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think crises are pushing the boundaries quicker. If you look on the positive side, right?
Yeah.
Energy crisis and environmental crisis.
Yeah, at least, you know, the energy crisis, at least, you know, it has both, you know, monetary effects and you know, it's a hot topic for society in general, but now it's also very much in the economy as well.
But I also think that, I mean, it definitely applies. But it's also, I think, if we just talk about the overall business environment and the crisis that a lot of companies are currently facing when it comes to, say, supply chains that are disrupted. We have like steeping inflation. Data is going to be a driver there as well. Just like the pandemic was for a lot of companies, that we saw that those companies that actually managed the pandemic times quite well were the ones who were already on a path to becoming data-driven. And I think the same applies for other type of crisis scenarios. I think I heard that in some client dialogue we had, they were saying that if we, based on the targets that we have, it's not enough to just cut down costs with and then this at an extremely high percentage. It's not enough. We're not going to reach the targets. We need to continue to grow as well. And how do we do that in these really uncertain times? How do we realize that scenario? And they looked towards data and wanted to look at how can we infuse data in our business so that we can actually one, become more efficient in the way that we operate and save a lot of money doing that, but also how can we grow our top line? And that was purely like that really radical. They had a really radical idea what they wanted to achieve and how they were going to achieve it, in what timeline. And that was driven by crisis because of the times that we're in now. So I think that the same reasoning goes on different, there are these life and death situations, of course, but it's also more about like the business environment.
I think supply chain is a very good idea, very good example, where the shortage of components and shortage of goods, right, is creating a ripple effect for a long time. Just the ship in the channel, Suez Channel, right, created that effect. Then came the rest of the crisis, right? So the whole supply chain. But then, how do you solve that problem? By predicting demand, much more accurate, so you actually can make sure you don't create a surplus of goods. You actually create a very effective supply chain of supply of goods to create this, to meet that demand. Because the worst thing you can do when you have that problem is to actually stock up things in a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah, but that might not be the solution. It might be more effective ways to get the products, or having a separate supply chain in another way, or like several ways to get your supplies. And I think that's something that, as you said, like crisis drives this. This is something that companies are thinking of now, but they probably didn't before, because this made them see the potential threat of the supply chain. Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, but is it, are we not learning from that there's kind of a weak spot in the setup of the global supply chains, that we can't be relying on China just shipping things to us? Isn't that what we need to do, like to also look at alternative sourcing methods? We can't have one.
You mean local production?
Yeah, or a kind of hybrid maybe.
But I think that's the overall direction that a lot of countries are. Many years ago, I worked at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Stockholm with trade, actually.
Cool.
And there the big the talk on the town was protectionism, and even in Europe, within the European Union, countries were establishing these trade barriers. And they were becoming really protectionistic in their way of doing business with other countries, and that was also the case on the digital side. So it's I think that's a trend that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think also nearly produced stuff in general. It's also a sustainability topic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of connecting to that time of environmental thinking and climate change.
Yeah.
So what is being done in this sector of, saving the world, sustainability? Now we're talking a lot about ESG reporting, right? That is super important, but ESG reporting by itself will not save any planet.
No.
What is your view on where this will lead to? What is the next thing we should use? Biodiversity, is that the number one topic? Is it going to be the, renewable energy, or?
Yeah, it's there's so many things.
We should have had Anna Töndevold here.
We should have.
Let's invite her next time.
Yeah. No, I think that topic is very data-driven. That's why it is very data-driven. And of course, for reporting, I think this is a big problem today, to actually create this data for the report and make it happen, right? But when you get the insight, a little bit what Petter was alluding to, when you see the data, you also understand what you need to do, what you need to fix, right?
Yeah.
In order to be a good.
But like Andrea said before, connecting that data that you use for reporting now to the business side will kind of increase the value of the company itself in also being sustainable or better as a company. And I think that's, even though they will better the top line, I think that's kind of where we're going at the moment.
And do we need more regulations to push this? Or do we need more angry citizens to push it?
Both.
I think both. Definitely. I think this is that type of crisis where we need to work at all fronts. I mean, it's the public sector doing their part. It's definitely the private sector doing their part, companies, and I think change happens when you start looking at things across. But coming back to your question from the beginning, I think, as you were saying, I mean, a lot of the focus is now on reporting and bringing visibility to the current state, and that's a struggle for many. I should say that many companies are even struggling with understanding, like, okay, how much emissions are we actually sending out each year? Basic questions like that, and it's a matter of data quality. It's a matter of understanding what additional data you have and so on. But it is the first step, because you need to understand your current state before you can start to change anything. You need to understand what's your baseline, and then once you have that insight, once you understand where should we prioritize, then you connect that to your targets, and if you can then operate in a way so that you're embedding intelligence in your operations, and that you can get a quick feedback loop and constantly see, not just get data each year and seeing how are we doing, but you should get it every week, every month, and understanding how are we actually doing. Do we need to take any extra measures? Are the targets that we've set, are we reaching those? So I think it's about looking at it on a maturity scale, seeing where do you start, and then where do you go from there.
But that's that's part of steering any organization, right? That you can't do it like every year. You kind of turn on the rudder. You need to have instant understanding of what happens if I pull here. What's the impact of it? How do you actually optimize, and what actually matters? Reduce the heat. Okay, it has this impact. Good, I know.
Yeah.
Smart buildings.
Yeah, exactly.
Smart buildings.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other reflections on this?
No, just we're talking about heavy subjects, but I'm really positive about this. I'm convinced that this is going to be data and AI is going to be an enabler of good things, and I think that from a societal point of view and as a citizen, not just speaking as a strategy consultant, but as a citizen, saying I'm convinced that I think there's a lot of possibilities here. But there's a long way to go.
Do we have enough people who actually can develop these solutions?
That is a good question. I mean, enabling this for the normal people, I think that will be the next step of enabling AI to be becoming even more relevant for society. Not sure how that will go, but I think that's what we need.
Will you have AI developing AI?
Of course. I think.
Then we will be redundant, right? Fear factor.
No, but that's when we go back to kind of the data quality and things behind. We have to know which data there is and what's actually behind.
Maybe the AI can do that for us.
Yeah, I mean it could be based on data that another AI have done, but I think that's probably not. I mean, it's of course good in one way, but I don't think that's the solution.
But it's something that AI cannot do. I mean, we maybe don't want it because it's going to be risk for bias, non-bias, and so on, right? And the data may be wrong, but is it something that have you looked at the painting the AI can do? It's fantastic.
Right? Yeah,
it's super nice. So even artists will be redundant if you really, you can
use it.
So is it something AI cannot do? You can build a house, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's always this talk about empathy and human feelings and that type of interaction, that we're never going to achieve that with machines.
Is that still true? I mean,
really?
Everything is based on logic, I think, in a way, and even human feelings might be based on logic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I mean, that's where the limits are today, I think. Sure.
The initial kind of neural networks that were kind of one of the milestones for AI. I think it was developed in the 60s or something. But I mean, those are images or replications of the synapses in the brain. So I think the kind of first steps of AI and the algorithms are trying to mimic the human brain.
Yeah.
You know, and how they work, and you know, I know that during some periods of time, a lot of research on how to optimize AI. But this was a couple of years ago. But then, you know, it was a lot about trying to understand how the human brain had evolved, and you know, it had some kind of relied on that actually evolution most likely solved this in a good way. Let's try it in neural networks as well, and try to kind of build the same kind of structures. You realized you have kind of some synapses that had one structure that, you know, are good on certain things, and other structures that are good on other things. That's kind of interesting. But you know, yes, the synapses are basically just you give them signals, and they do a score and have an output, and that's basically the human brain.
When you talk about this, I am thinking about Max Tegmark's Life 2.0. Have you read it?
No,
The book.
Yeah,
I think it's called Life 2.0, where he's talking about the future of AI and the risk he's seeing with that, right? And it's quite insightful, but also a bit scary.
Exactly.
Good. Yeah, I was, you know, Jonas, you said something that I kind of piqued my interest. You know, how you interpret data and data quality. And yes, I guess we will see better solutions for that as well, that are automated and that has AI support in it. But I think, you know, today, going back to a bit more stuff that are happening today, I feel like I you know, in every data project I've been at, there's been such a... People are quick to, you know, pull the data and then into modeling and without really knowing some of the quality issues or how to interpret the data. I had an interesting... this was early in my career. We built a predictive model. We were supposed to build a predictive model for finding customers likely to leave the company, a churn model. And we collected data on the customer, historic data on the customers from various sources in the BI tools or in the databases. We built a kind of a one big table out of that and start to build models, you know, finding what correlated with this flag. And, you know, as a natural step of doing the models, you kind of come to like the first thing you do is kind of what variable seems to have a lot of importance to see if you're about to leave the company. Typically, I think like you call customer service a lot, then that's a good tell sign if you're a unhappy customer and you'll leave. But we found out that a field from CRM that was if it was populated or not. We had this hypothesis that if you had an email, we were kind of interested in the email aspect. That if you had an email with a domain for the company, we thought that you were more loyal because you had an email in that kind of service provider. So kind of leaving would most likely create some hassle because you will change. This was the time people had those and not only Gmails. So it's that old, this story. But so we were interested in the email dimension and we had pulled it into the data model. But then we found out that, you know, that it had an extremely good ability to predict the customers. So if you had an email, you were perfectly safe. Any email, almost. Like those customers were the safest customers. Like we could do whatever with them; they would not leave. But then it turns out, like we were like, this is too good to be true. But we had a steering group, and we had, as usual, tight schedules, and we had a steering group, and we presented that in some kind of midpoint meeting. So it was not the final thing, but in the midpoint meeting, and then we came back. This doesn't make sense. It's too strong. And then we kind of drilled down to it and talked to the people in the managing the databases. And this was before GDPR, but we had other kind of things that, regulations on how you store data. But apparently, they had a logic implemented in the BI system that, wiped the email, all historic emails of any customers that they would have. So they kind of wiped it. So when we pulled it out, they had kind of deleted just that field. So we had historic data on the customers, but just the contact email was deleted. So, it was not only, it's kind of a data quality thing, but it was not like so easy to find that, this was biased data, really. It was contained from the flag of leaving. It was really contained. Contaminated, I guess it's the contaminated data. That's the new thing, maybe.
But that's it. I mean, it's important to find these patterns, right? That is actually creating the problem.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about that when we do a project, like you need domain knowledge, you need kind of data knowledge and so on. But I think under knowing the data we're working with, what have been done with it, what's the lineage of the data, and how has it been tampered with, that becomes super important when we build models that actually take decisions. Mm-hmm. And I think here, it's harder to invest the time and effort in doing that. But I think that's super, super important.
You need all that kind of competence, right? In the industry, the domain, understanding the data, but you also need a lot of common sense, right? And
yes.
More common sense. It's too good to be true.
Yeah.
Why is it telling me this, right? And then you start to drill down. There was actually a public organization in Finland a couple of years ago who actually put an AI solution as part of their board. Mm-hmm. Because they thought, we need to make more insightful decisions. Mm. In order to make these insightful decisions, we should have an AI solution that is actually giving us instant answers so we can make these decisions. It was not a formal board member because you cannot have something non-biological as a board member because of the responsibilities you have in a board. But it was actually part of every board meeting to actually inform the leadership about difficult questions they try to solve to run the business. Do you think this will be a good idea for more companies? Where you have maybe a board composed of different people, right?
Yeah.
From different backgrounds, but may not be on top of the latest technology and all the information they need to take care of. Because that's a place where you need a lot of information. Because you make the decisions that will impact the whole company, right? And maybe the future.
It's an interesting thought, I think, because, that type of AI could probably analyze all the news, something that happens to competitors or equally similar companies or something like that, and could adjust or suggest some decisions based on that also, which you probably couldn't as a board member. So summarizing and collecting a lot of information could be a part of that, and making sure that there's possibility to take a decision from that.
But wouldn't, when we look at the board today, you have kind of different responsibilities and backgrounds, or if you look at the C-level, like maybe that's even more also applicable. Could you have a support of an AI in your C-suite? But I guess the first step would be to have some AI that's really good at the supply chain of the company, or the operations of the company, or the marketing of the companies. And do you have kind of more focused AIs that support the CMO, have their kind of marketing focused
on the C-suite instead of having it on the board? It's more kind of different topics every meeting, right? You need to just handle them. So it's more tricky, but I agree on the C-suite as well. But
and my point is a bit, it's so wide, like, and maybe it's more getting used to, but, you know, it feels like more niched competences are a bit more, things that you could see coming sooner. That actually you have someone that actually tells, you know, what the perfect breakdown of this area, or you know, this is the competition on the market for you guys. I know because I've collected all the data on this. Boom. But
and some things you can never predict, right? Like I think it was a big Swedish company in Insjön who had a lot of their goods coming from Wuhan.
Perfect place.
Yeah.
Perfect place. And of course, in the beginning of the pandemic, before the pandemic was declared a pandemic and before it became a problem, the debate was still on, is it going to be a problem for us or not? All the production stopped of the supply chain, right? And you can never predict this kind of, maybe you can, I don't know. Now you can.
You can probably predict it earlier.
Yeah.
I mean,
if you're informed about what is the most kind of critical area in our business. If something happens in this place, you know, what will happen? Scenario. I don't know.
But I think what we're talking about now, maybe there's a way to kind of structure it a little bit. And there's this term, decision intelligence, which is basically when you apply analytics and artificial intelligence in decision making. And maybe there are various degrees of how much are we letting the technology make decisions in our business. So, for example, in the individual functions, maybe there are certain things, there are processes where we want to achieve full automation based on intelligent insights. Whereas in the C-suite or at the board level, they just want insights, but they want to make the decisions. So there's this degree as well of how are we combining artificial intelligence, machine learning with automation as well. And that I think has different applicabilities across hierarchies in an organization.
Absolutely. And the combination of all this, I guess, in the end could be this board member, but before that, individual applications or insights from specific areas is probably a good way forward.
Yeah, all levels, different purposes, different types of AI. Talking about AI in sports, I just need to touch that subject. I was so impressed. My daughter was in Gothia Cup, you know, the super big competition. I think the world biggest football competition.
It is.
This summer, and I couldn't be there, but I really want to follow the games. And they are playing like in a super big area. There are like 10 different football courts, and there is this AI camera.
Yeah.
You've seen that?
Yeah.
Trained on data, understanding where the ball is, zooming in, zooming out. Of course, not commenting anything, but really following the game. And I was so impressed because of the surrounding, right? A lot of, 10 different football courts playing at the same time. And the AI camera can just focus on the game where my daughter was playing. And zooming in, zooming out. This was really like, you don't need a cameraman or a camerawoman to do that. It's really so impressive, good, right?
It's really cool. I haven't seen that, but yeah.
That's also for the good.
Yeah. I think that's interesting to compare kind of its, the maturity of the analytics and done in sports are very much kind of different between different sports. And I think especially in the US, they have a history of being super data driven in all the sports, and have had, chief analytics officers in most kind of NFL NFL teams and NBA teams.
And this is since the Moneyball, right?
Exactly. There are even movies about it. Exactly. No, but I think it's like soccer has been way behind of the American sports, but it's catching up. not so much in Sweden, I would say. I mean, too small league, but you're actually starting to to see really some interesting analysis, and it's more than just AI. I mean, it's part of being able to sensoric stuff and being able to track people and so on. But I kind of enjoy really the ability to make the somewhat complex kind of, it's 22 people for 90 minutes passing a ball, and then kind of boiling that down to statistics that are meaningful and actually insightful as well, are super interesting. That's really a technique.
Yeah. But also about how you make decisions while in, for example, a game. With so a lot, I know now that a lot of like football players, they have sensors on them, and they can actually track based on if you've had an injury and but you're still playing. Now you don't just say, oh, you'll play 45 minutes and that will change. Now you say you get max runs where you enter your maximum pace, and then we change you, and that can happen in 20 minutes or in 5 minutes or in 75, and
that's cool.
They then track that with data, and I think that's extremely interesting.
But also analysis on where people move, I guess, in real time during a match would be really cool. Yeah. Because then you can see where are the rooms and where are people moving. I think that's, a big development going forward, if it's not already there.
And can you predict injuries? That's what you talked about, right?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely a really good use case. And that's AI for good. It's about people and their physical ability.
And also when you want to buy a player,
yes.
you need to look at, how does that player look like actually? If you look at every joint, and how is that player running? Will he be injured or she? Yeah, maybe.
Definitely.
So the price will be dependent on it.
Yeah.
What do you think about insurance?
Exactly.
I just need to touch on that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Should we have insurances based on how we are behaving?
Obviously that would be good for
combining the risk,
companies.
predicting the persons we actually are. Are we careful? Not careful?
It's obviously good for the insurance companies. I'm not sure if it's good for us, but I think we will come to that part where it's common to have an individual insurance based on your either physical abilities or how
driving style.
Driving style or how.
But isn't that good for the society in a way? You want to have people who are not crashing the car every second time, every second time they drive, or not doing anything that is hurting someone else or hurting yourself, right? So saving money for the healthcare, saving money for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So you create a behavior based on the premium you pay.
Yeah. I think you're into integrity questions about how do you feel free or not free.
Yeah.
And you're getting into the individual freedom. But I think, we'll come to the point where we will use data in that way. Absolutely.
We already are.
Yeah, exactly. We already are. So it's more a question on how we adapt. And I think, as you said, it's good for society, for sure. The question is if it actually will lead to good things in the society. I'm not sure.
And where do you draw the line?
Or if you're very rich, you may not care to pay a high premium.
Exactly.
It's
Definitely.
worth it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I agree with everything that's been said, but still there's I think there's the essential question is where do you draw the line, and I think once you enter this way of operating and thinking, I think that line is constantly going to be pushed, and we have a really big country where we're seeing the extreme of this, where the use of data and tracking individuals' behaviors are essentially impacting your everyday life in the highest regard. So I'm a bit hesitant, but
could you explain that? What do you mean with the highest regard?
So I'm China.
No.
Where basically you have zero privacy, tracking all elements of your private life, and your life is extremely impacted by that. It's a surveillance state. And not saying that the insurance companies here in the Nordics will ever reach that point, but I'm saying that I think this question of where do we draw the line for privacy, I think that's a limit that can be pushed, a boundary that can be pushed once we get used to certain things.
But it's also a matter of what culture you are. I mean, we are quite normally, we are comparing the culture we have in the Nordics and Sweden with the culture we have in a country like China. And we say this is, we could never imagine these kind of things here in Sweden because it will controlling Big Brother and all of that. But I think it's very hard to actually be, if you are grown up in a different culture, you may accept it like it's perfect. It will create a good society. So it's very easy to say it's wrong, right? But it's not that easy, actually, if you look at the way the society is working.
And you're onto something here, and looking at that same scenario from a business point of view, something that I think a lot of companies can become much better at when we talk about these ethical issues is actually consulting their stakeholders, consulting their end users. Like what's privacy to you, and what's privacy to you, and that's something that historically some industries have been really good at when it comes to, for example, human rights types of issues. So telecom, even healthcare, they're really good at that, consulting their stakeholders and getting an understanding of how they feel that they're impacted. And I think in these types of questions, that's one way forward as well.
Yeah, when it comes to, I guess, what we've seen it today, insurance company, and you can, sign up for having a sensor in your car to get the slightly less insurance, what do you call it? Premium. I guess, it doesn't kind of scale that big because people are not that passionate or don't think the car insurance premium is that big of a deal, I guess. But in the same way, in order to give up on your integrity, I guess the payback has to be better. But I guess an option is still, though, I mean, the way they have done it, it's kind of free for people to sign up, right? It doesn't, they don't say that we need to have this on all our customers.
Yes.
But then, it's only the very, you can, question, does it have a positive effect on society? Because it's who's signing up for that? It's only the people that have a very secure driving style or are very confident in knowing that they are very...
they can save on that.
Yeah, they can save on it. But, what's the benefit for society? What you said, going back to, like, they are already good car drivers. And if you have the opt-in kind of setup, that some people use it and some people don't. You have a natural way of filtering.
No, but I think, if you look at the technology and AI and data, we are inevitably going in a direction, right, that is creating better business for this example, like insurance companies. They will benefit from it. Some safe drivers will benefit from it, right? But the technology is driving things until it might become a problem, and then it becomes regulated. So I think we cannot just stop it. We can have a lot of opinions about if it's right or wrong, but we cannot stop it. Technology is driving actually the evolutions until we see the problem comes. Then we try to fix it, but behavior is behavior. People are people. It will continue until regulation comes in. I think we will see, it's just the beginning of what we see now. I think it will continue. I just wanted to bring up one topic. Time flies. We have a big kind of table of good things in front of us. We just are taking a little bit of it. So we have work to do. But I would like to talk about a topic that I've been thinking about a lot. AI and democracy. Will AI be a threat? And I'm thinking about, images, how we use AI to influence in the wrong way. You can fix the voice, you can fix the picture, you can do anything. You cannot detect the difference, right? In order to influence the way you want it, either by purpose, if you are representing a party, or if you're representing a foreign country, you may do it for a different purpose. But do you think this is?
It's a reality.
Exactly.
It's already happening.
Yeah, it's super scary.
But will it be the end of democracy?
I think, first of all, what I'm waiting on is, it's like a counter strike of these deep fakes, that you get better ways to see what's fake or not. So, and that every kind of social media or media outlet also have that in the kind of...
Like a pie chart.
Not the pie chart, yeah. How much fake is it? Big pie chart, small pie chart. No, but just, so that as soon as something kind of pops up on social media, that everybody have that kind of instinct that let's check the fake engine here, or that is built in Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, that this is it's fake, like that you have just as efficient AIs that predict that.
It is
countermeasures.
Yeah, that's the first thing I would say. But it's
I'm thinking about Wikipedia for like 10 years ago. Wiki was kind of the go-to source for facts, because there was so many people correcting things that were wrong. So you could basically trust quite a lot of that information, and that's what we're lacking in a lot of the information on the internet today. That type of source.
But I also I totally agree with what you've said, and to add to that, I think it's also about understanding that this is a reality that we live in, and also from like the public organizations that we have that are meant to kind of manage these questions, and they are. This is something that we know is happening. And that's something that we then need to take the right precautions. So we need to be setting up the right structure so that we're actually combating these issues.
But there are new agencies being developed to actually do the countermeasures, making it easy for people to detect, and also warning for this is fake, right?
Yes.
This is not fake. I just have the feeling that they will always be behind. Yeah. So I think the only way to actually get on top of the problem will be to educate citizens. Take the
but I think
bring the responsibility to the source.
But such a big topic to bring up this last 5 minutes. But I love it. I love it. But we've been in an age of time where we've had more and more, we talked about the phone before, but more and more high definition cameras available, to collect and record whatever is happening. So we've kind of been in this wave of just increasing more and more things that are happening around us, and not a single moment are missed. So we've had that kind of luxury time of seeing all the good stuff happening, right? Or bad things being said, or everywhere, anything that has happened has been caught on camera. But now we're kind of going into new age where we don't rely on it, where we think that we don't. As you say, we need to educate the total population on the earth need to have a shift in the mindset, knowing that we can't trust. I guess we know that with images already. That's been around for 20, 30 years, that we don't trust images in the same way. Now it's the same thing with videos and voice, of course. And that's also the mindset we need to kind of adapt and actually go back to the source of the material. Is this trustworthy and so on?
So that's a responsibility of the parents.
Critical thinking.
Don't take everything for granted.
No, but it's hard, because especially, I think we, the older generation, is going to be having a harder time because we like, what do you mean? It's a video and it's audio. I hear it's Barack Obama saying this. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
Good. Any last topic you would like to bring up that we didn't discuss?
Maybe not a topic, but maybe a final remark.
Yes.
I think we've been talking about a lot of ways that data and AI can have positive impacts on our society, and but also that you need to consider the risks and the potential negative implications. But I just want to stress that I think there's a risk of not using it as well.
Yeah.
So by not making informed decisions and not looking at the data, I think that's potentially I wouldn't say a larger risk because I don't want to compare it, but I think that's definitely something that we should avoid. So with that, I'm leaving it to Jonas.
Good remark. No, so my final remark would be like I love the things that you can do with a large amounts of data and the possibilities you can see, just connecting data points in different ways. I think that's the possibility, and of course we should make use of it. So I agree with you, Andrea, but I just see the possibilities within the data, and that's my final remark.
Oh wow, yeah, no, but super interesting discussion. It's been kind of a roller coaster in topics here. Been fun. I don't have a kind of final conclusion for me ready here, Per. What do you say?
No pie
No,
charts.
I thank you very much for having good reflections on the roller coaster of these different type of topics, high and low. I think we can talk about AI, not using it or using it, but we will use it anyway.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's like a bug, right? It's here, it will stay, it will evolve. We just need to embrace it. We need to be very critical around. It's like the big car manufacturer in the US said, who's doing a lot of electric cars. It's the most dangerous weapon in the wrong hand, but it's also something that can solve a lot of our problems. And if we have a lot of problems on this planet, right, then I think AI can solve them. But it's like everything. If you have a non-bio solution, the problem will accelerate so much faster if you cannot create a good bio solution instead. So AI is in the wrong hands, in the wrong use, also dangerous. But I think it's great. It will make work much more happier, and I think will make our lives better. And if everything goes well, we can also get the salary from the common by having AI doing all the jobs. So that will be fantastic.
Mining bitcoins.
Mining bitcoins.
That's the
very
future.
energy requirement. So I think with that said, I think we had a good discussion. Thank you very much, and thank you, Goran, for hosting us.
Thank you.